So today we have joining us Kristy Deetz and Edward S. Lewis, and they're going to be talking about their new book, The Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy. Kristy Deetz is a professor of art at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Her extensive exhibition record includes national and international venues. Edward S. Lewis is the pen name of E.L. Risden, a professor of English at St. Norbert College, who has over 20 books of scholarship, fiction, poetry, and translation. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess I'm up first. Just to tell you a little bit about how the Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy got started. The series, the painting series, which is featured in the book, came out of a sabbatical. And I was thinking of a way, or seeking a way to advance my work sort of in a different direction. I had been painting a very detailed fabric and burying my head in postmodern theory. And they're actually very realistic pictures that sort of hovered on the fold of representation and abstraction. And I wanted to expand that so I could go in many directions instead of sort of specifically theoretical ones. So when I went to Italy for my sabbatical, go on the Piero della Francesca trail, which Ed accompanied me, we had such a great time. And I think what gave me permission to add new image is to just the fabrics and wrinkles of fabric, was seeing Piero della Francesca's resurrection painting, and just traveling the trail where you go through different cities in Italy and you look at the paintings, some that are frescoes, others that are in museums, and that sort of thing. You visit the town where he lived. But the first painting I did in that series, then I started to incorporate images from all kinds of visual culture, and felt like a door opened, that I could create all kinds of stories with all sorts of illusions. And two characters sort of rose out of all of those paintings that were sort of consistently in the series. And the first one was Rabbit, and it is a shapeshifter. And then Kitty Boy got put in, probably because he needed Rabbit needed a sidekick. And Kitty Boy, kind of, I would call him based on our buff tabby Bingley. And if you see, there's the cover of the book on the screen, the sort of allusion to those big-eyed paintings of big-eyed children and cats and that sort of kitschy art. It's sort of leaning in that direction. There's Bingley's head on riding the back of Rabbit over the postmodern radar. So this is that whole painting of the cover image. And this is called Rabbit and Kitty Boy Escape the Postmodern Radar. I think Ed's gonna read some from that. And I think the story will pretty much tell something about what my thinking was. So the paintings, it's a little different than an illustrated book, where the stories come first and then the images are made to accompany the stories. My clever husband, we're always in conversation about what we're doing in our studios, writing and making artwork. So I'm always talking about what I'm doing. And so he's sort of privy to my thinking behind all of these. So his stories actually sort of explain the paintings in a very gentle and fun way, with lots of puns. I think there's a broad audience for what I'm doing. So I should probably keep going here. You might think of the conversations as maybe similar to those that we might see in Calvin and Hobbes. There are other things in comics and other sources. but I'll show you some more pictures. You'll see in the background of these paintings is fabric that goes in and out of the imagery. And Rabbit and Kitty Boy, you see an allusion to a Georgia O'Keeffe cloud painting, as well as Victorian sort of postcard kitsch and different things, and my own inventions. Here's Where's Kitty Boy? You see Rabbit desperately looking for Kitty Boy, who's the Zen Sage sitting on the edge of the riverbank and looking very frantic. And I was thinking of the carrot legs as being something from nature, as like a Chinese landscape painting that's in the background, but also the idea of dangling the carrot and always sort of desperately pursuing desires. And then the whole painting sort of unfolding up in that corner. And this painting is Rabbit and Kitty Boy mending the fabric of meaning. I'm combining images of medieval saints. This is St. George on the back of the dragon, but here it's Kitty Boy and a version of Rabbit. And in the background is a Persian landscape. And then instead of a sword, you see Kitty Boy with a needle and thread sewing up the fabric of meaning. And this one, I'm a rather bad sleeper, as Ed knows, so always looking for a good night's sleep. But this one, I think a lot of these pictures also interface with digital imaging. There's a digital sifting that happens in the sketch that I create for the image. And this might look a little bit like a screensaver. It's also Rabbit, Kitty Boy, and there's Doggy. That's another character that occasionally pops in. It's based on our neighbor's dog, Doggy, a white yellow lab. And they're in onesies out on the landscape.
That painting won an award.
Oh, I guess it did. I can't remember what, but it did.
Graphis magazine.
Oh, that's right. Graphis magazine. Yeah, it's for designing.
Digital
design and illustration. Mm-hmm. And this is targeting Tommans' Rabbit. There's a lot of things that are going on in these that allude to other artists and other imagery, multiple styles. There's a pair of lips in the center of the painting. And this is the last one I was going to show, and I'll go back to the beginning and Ed can take over. And this is called Hank's Rebirth Dilemma. My father passed away. This is kind of a painting and dedicated to him, of all the options of what he might be when he is reborn. He was a dentist, so he loved being a dentist, and that top image in the painting is of a dentist examining someone's teeth in the dental chair. So he might just be a dentist again. And they're just aspects of his personality, and then things that are totally unlike him. And then there's stitching that stitches all of the images together. And that kind of led to the near series that I'm doing now. But I'll go back and I'll let Ed take over from here.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Just by way of adding to the introduction, I think what Kristy said is probably the most important point for me to reiterate. Some people looking at the book think of it as an illustrated book, but typically an illustrated book means that an artist takes a written text and responds to it visually, whereas this is an illustrated text, but it's the other way around. The art came first, and the stories help illustrate the art. So we think it's kind of unusual and interesting for that reason too. I wasn't thinking about writing on the paintings, but Kristy mentioned it to me one day, almost just as sort of a fun activity. She said, would you consider writing a story for one of the paintings? And my first thought for that was, oh no, I really wouldn't dare do that, because the paintings are so complex and so layered and so interesting, and there's so much to say that I feared I really couldn't do them justice. And but Kristy said, just try and see what happens. So one evening I took the first painting in the list and sat down to write a story, and I found that something came pretty easily. It didn't have to be very long. They're just very short little stories. I showed it to Kristy and she liked it.
I thought it was great.
So
I just chuckled the whole way through when I read his stories, and he has a great sense of humor, but he captures the humor maybe in a slightly different way that's also in the paintings.
Yeah. I'm not introducing anything to the paintings that isn't already there. There's already humor in there, and there's sometimes sadness of living, and there's comments on art history, and sometimes I wouldn't say snarky, but slightly satirical comments on art criticism and that kind of thing. So having the one story, I just went ahead with the next, and it actually came really quickly and very easily, and the stories took almost no time to write. I think I did all of them in about 2 weeks, and that was even during college semester, when I often don't have time to write a lot. But the paintings are so inspiring that it really didn't take very long. And once I got a pattern and had a sense of the characters and the world they live in, it went pretty quickly. I've always thought that for writing, one of the keys is the world of the text. I think if lots of people love mystery stories, lots of people love romances, but a lot of mysteries are kind of alike, and a lot of romances are kind of alike. So you're not necessarily reading them just for the plot, because you might have to guess who done it in a whodunit, but you pretty much know the general direction that such stories will take. So the key to get an audience into the book is the world of the text. You got to create a place that people want to go to, and where they want to spend a few hours with you. They want to learn the characters. They want to learn about where they live and where they eat lunch and what they see on a daily basis. That's what draws the reader in and keeps the reader in. So my goal was to kind of add to and tie together, just like Kristy does, the little bit of embroidery in each painting to link things together. So the stories are kind of links to move the audience through the world of the text, from painting to painting to painting. So you already showed the images. We have a little outline to follow. So should I go ahead and read a couple stories?
Yes, please do.
Is that all right if I do that? If I read a couple of the story samples?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, here goes. And to keep it easy, I'll read the story that goes with the visual that's on screen. So the first one, I had a really hard time working out the titles for the stories. No, I didn't.
It's the title of the painting.
It's the title of the painting. That's the title of the story. So that was easiest. Now, how easy is that? When someone gives you all kinds of wonderful ideas, they give you an amazing visual, they give you a title, and all you have to do is put in a few words and you're done.
Oh, he makes it sound so easy. I don't know how he does it.
It isn't always easy, but in this case it was. So here's the story, and it takes up with two buddies, and they're talking. "That doesn't make sense," Rabbit said. "What's that?" Kitty Boy asked. "Postmodern," Rabbit replied. "It's either modern, now, or before now. If you can sit here and look at it, it can't be after now." They were sitting together looking at a book called Postmodern Art. "Modern in art doesn't mean now," Kitty Boy explained. "It means some kinds of art between the 1880s and 1950s. "What kinds?" Rabbit asked. "Work that rejected old ideas and tried new techniques instead, trying to get everyone to see in different ways. It prefers irony to realism." "What's irony?" Rabbit asked. "No one knows," Kitty Boy said. "So, postmodernism must come after modernism," Rabbit suggested. "Exactly," Kitty Boy answered, smiling. "What does it do?" Rabbit asked. "It rejects old ideas and tries to make everyone see in new ways." "That's what you said about modernism," Rabbit said doubtfully. "It brings into question everything we know. Kitty Boy said. It casts a radar over art, language, science, poetry, everything, to see what lies behind it. Kitty Boy was doing his best to explain. Radar, Rabbit mumbled. That sounds scary. I know, Kitty Boy said. Hey, I have an idea. Let's go flying. We can look around to see if we can spot the radar, to see what it's looking for. Great idea, Rabbit said. But I don't want just to see the radar. I want to get free of it, so it's not following us around all the time, trying to ruin our ideas. Hop on. Say, you're looking very Victorian today. He admired Kitty Boy's outfit. Thank you, Kitty Boy said. Kitty Boy jumped on Rabbit's back, and off they went. Where to? Rabbit asked. Higher, Kitty Boy said. This sky's looking awfully Georgia O'Keeffe to me. Okay, Rabbit asked, and they went higher. Higher still, Kitty Boy exclaimed. Look, there's a butterfly. Let's go talk to him. Hey, he looks kind of like you. Like me? Rabbit asked. Hello, said the butterfly, surprised to see someone flying so near. Hello, Kitty Boy said. We're trying to escape the postmodern radar. Do you have any idea how to do it? Why do you want to do that? The butterfly asked. We don't want it to catch us and ruin our ideas, Rabbit answered. Well, there it is, down below, the butterfly said. Look, you've already flown high above it. Rabbit and Kitty Boy looked down, and they saw the radar. They had indeed escaped it, at least for a little bit. Oh, I feel better already, Rabbit said. Me too, Kitty Boy replied. Thank you, Butterfly. Don't mention it. What are you thinking about now that we're free to think whatever we want? Kitty Boy asked Rabbit. Not much of anything, Rabbit said. How about you? Me either. But I like being up here. Maybe we can just fly around for a bit and something will come to us. Good idea, Rabbit said. And they did. That's story number 1.
Nice job.
From the adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy, the singular adventures.
Ed can say it really great in French.
Shall we try story number 2? Are we ready?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Everybody take a breath. I certainly will. Chapter 2. Where's Kitty Boy? Now, if you can see the visual, Rabbit is, as Kristy said, desperately looking for his buddy, and Kitty Boy is way down at the bottom of the painting fishing. But Rabbit doesn't quite know that yet. So here they are, the two buddies in conversation again. I had a very strange dream, Rabbit said. Tell me about it, Kitty Boy suggested. They were sitting together in the sun, and Rabbit was nibbling on a sweet piece of grass. It felt like a Zen dream, except not happy. Not everything in life goes happily, Kitty Boy said. I know, Rabbit said, but some things seem scarier than others. That's true, Kitty Boy said. Do you remember the end of the dream? Maybe it has a good ending, and you'll feel better then about the rest. How about if I start at the beginning? Rabbit asked. That's all right, too. Go right ahead, Kitty Boy said. Well, I was striding along in a landscape that looked like a Chinese painting, Rabbit said. Except I wasn't entirely myself. I had long legs that looked and felt like carrots. Carrots? I know what they look like, but what does a carrot feel like? Stiff, kind of like walking on stilts, Rabbit said. I've never done that, Kitty Boy said. What does that feel like? Stiff and wobbly. You're way up off the ground, standing on tall posts, and you walk by raising and pushing along the posts. You feel like you could fall at any time, but you just have to keep walking because you don't know any way to get down from those posts. Wow, that does sound scary. Maybe you could walk over to a tree, step off the stilts onto a branch, and climb down the trunk. Kitty Boy offered. Ooh, I like that idea. I'll try it if I ever again find myself on stilts made of carrots in a dream. But that wasn't why I felt scared. Well, why then? Because I was looking all over and I couldn't find you, Rabbit exclaimed. I thought you were lost, and I was striding and striding everywhere looking for you. Thank you, Kitty Boy said. No need to thank me. Just don't get lost again. Well, I wasn't really lost. You were dreaming. Sure felt like it was a real thing to me. So don't get lost, even when I'm dreaming. Maybe I can help you find me. Do you think so? Rabbit found that idea helpful. Yes, just let me think for a moment. You're walking through a Chinese landscape painting looking for me. Where would I be? Ah, I know. Fishing. Fishing? Yes, I'm sitting meditatively by a stream and fishing. Why would you do that? Because I'm hungry. You're always hungry. I'll share my fish with you if you'd like some. How can I share your fish when I can't even find you? I'm right by the stream, dressed in a robe, at the bottom of the painting. Look. Hey, how'd you do that? All you had to do was say it, and there you are in my dream, true as life. That's the nice thing about dreams. They can come true, but be careful. Why? Rabbit asked. Because some dreams can become nightmares, Kitty Boy warned. Make sure you're having a good dream before you let it come true. If it's a dream, I'm not sure I can control it so easily, Rabbit said. I'm hungry, Kitty Boy said. Yes, I know. You're hungry in the dream, and that's why you're fishing. No, Kitty Boy said. I mean, I'm hungry, really, right now. Want to go get something to eat? I could eat, Rabbit answered. Maybe not carrots today, though. Maybe in another dream, you could walk on fish, Kitty Boy said. He was full of suggestions that day. Walking on fish? That doesn't make any sense. Fish can't live out of water, and I'd probably slip right off them and fall. Dreams don't always make sense, Kitty Boy said. Sometimes they just happen. Kind of like art, Rabbit concluded.
That's great.
Two samples.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I guess we've read two stories, and believe it or not, we're in the process of thinking about another book since we've got this one done. And the next series that Ed will be working on, and it's in terms of writing kind of a reaction to each painting, is my series called Holidays Unfolding. So I thought I'd show you some images from that series. And it has a lot of elements of Hank's rebirth dilemma, which kind of informed them. But Holidays Unfolding is probably a little darker than, although there are a lot of dark elements in the Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy. The Holidays Unfolding has a lot of social commentary, particularly about American holidays and associated myths and beliefs of those holidays. And it also uses my history as an artist too. It refers to my history as an artist. So each painting has a background pattern that's made from images from past paintings that I merge together and create a kind of pattern unit. And then I have those, that unit printed on fabric digitally. So if you look closely or you knew my history, you'd see that there's a painting embedded very deeply into the fabric. So all of the paintings, like you see in New Year's Eve pausing on the screen there, have this pattern running through that's actually digitally printed on silk. And then I stretch that over a canvas and create a sketch digitally, and then paint from that sketch. So there's a lot of, again, sifting of digital things So I think there's a sort of slight reference of the digital in the work that maybe adds a bit to the dialogue. And then after the image is painted, I'll go back through and I'll do embroidery embellishments. So it has a kind of more of a textile edge than perhaps through the veil paintings, which is the series that came before that Rabbit and Kitty Boy is based on. So this is New Year's Eve pausing, and I'll just say something really brief about each image. Here you see Rabbit and Kitty Boy. In Holidays Unfolding, Rabbit and Kitty Boy, the stories will begin at New Year's Eve, and they're sort of meeting up again after being absent, being apart for a whole year. And I guess when the book comes out, you should get it. Find out what happens. But here, Rabbit and Kitty Boy survey the goings on. There you see a bunch of kind of drunken, disorderly, undirected, unaware rabbits that look quite a bit like the rabbit in the giant television screen. You often see television screens celebrating things and New Year's Eve parties. But in the screen, there you see a trumpet blowing rabbit, causing great destruction. And then the decorations around the room are these hanging rabbit's feet. Are they lucky? Or, gee, that makes a very interesting and somewhat dark connection to the story. So this is New Year's Eve pausing. And Valentine's Day exploding. And sometimes the little enframements highlight the image that was made to create the pattern in the background that has kind of its own text that's going on. And in this one, you see the little crying eye and a heart votive image. And just all kinds of things going on in these. The table, I was thinking of still life imagery, and so there's always a table, but the table will flip and turn and different kinds of things. So still life is a kind of reminder of death oftentimes, but it's always a very still image, but I'm taking the idea of still life and making it a very active image and unexpected, turning it on its head and playing with that genre of painting.
The French name for what we call in English still life is nature morte, nature dead.
This is Easter falling. So they do in some ways the opposite of what you might think. This is a detail. You can see the embroidery, the digital pattern, and the painting, how that all mixes together. This is Labor Day circling. Probably, again, the idea of the holiday, but then also perhaps this is pointless labor of going around and around in a circle. And how the really large rabbits down to the really young, small rabbits perpetuate maybe certain habits that aren't perhaps necessarily good. I think a lot of times the beauty of the image kind of pulls you in, but the meaning behind the painting plays against that kind of beauty, or lusciousness, or beautiful textured things. This is Thanksgiving sliding. They're also really funny. And we'll end with this one. This is Independence Day cracking. Again, sort of a timely narrative. There's a flotilla. I was kind of thinking of George Washington crossing the Potomac a bit on this one, only
The Delaware.
Oh, Delaware, sorry.
You must have crossed the Potomac.
Well, maybe at one point. There's a giant rabbit on the largest hot dog with his power tie, again, trumpeting and causing the destruction of sort of reference to the flag in the background, bombs bursting in air, and everyone is kind of abandoning or trying to hang on to their boats, and the boats all each have a kind of destructive device attached to them. I think that's about it, actually. So we can end with that image. And Ed, I'm sure he has some things to talk about what he's thinking of.
Yeah, just a few thoughts. I won't start on the stories until Kristy has finished the series, but she shows me the paintings as she finishes them, so I get to get the back of my mind, at least going over some possibilities. And the first book, the one that we read from and showed you the images of today, that's some people look at it and say, oh, it's a children's book. Well, it isn't a children's book. It is sort of comics for adults in that way, but it's there's some elements that are troubling, I think, as well as items that are just sort of funny and enjoyable and light. But then if our book does well enough that anyone will publish the sequel, which we hope will happen, the stories will have to be much more disturbing, I think. It'll have a little more troubling tone than the first one will. So it'll be a little bit different kind of writing project, I think, just as it's been a little bit of a different painting project for Kristy. But that's all part of the process. You kind of have to let it unfold and become what it will. You might have an idea for a painting or a series of paintings or a story or a series of stories when you start out. But my experience is it's going to become what it's going to become. And you do your best just to let it do that rather than to try to force it into one thing or another. So yeah, that's something I always share with students too. You know, they'll say, well, I have something to say. Should I write an essay? Should I write a story? Should I write a poem? And my advice is always, you kind of have to let it become what it wants to become. Sometimes, unfortunately, we professors impose upon them a form or a format, but I always tell them, whenever someone doesn't impose on you, which is much better, let it become what it wants to become. And that's what Kristy has done with the paintings, and that's what I'll be doing with the stories too, once I start. It's always a little bit frightening to me to take up a process like this, because once again, I find myself needing to scramble to do my best to do justice, which I know I can't quite do, but do something that's at least worthy of inclusion with the paintings. And I will be back at that adventure again very soon.
Yeah, that was nicely said. I like that Ed mentioned our students, because our students are always on our minds. And I think that we're active, practitioners of what we profess. And understand the process a lot, and love the process. And I hope that we can relay that to our students. And there is a kind of learning to be comfortable not knowing what you're doing. As the students might feel this way when they have to start an assignment, there's this blank canvas. I always tell Ed, oh gee, before I start a painting, I'm always afraid, sometimes even when I first begin it, that I might not be able to accomplish what I hope to do. And then you just sort of try to let that feeling sit more in the background and just focus on totally throwing yourself into the process of doing it. And then it works out. It really works out, and you learn something new. I think because we made this book, the first book, The Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy, and then the second book will be called Holidays Unfolding, The Continuing Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy. We did confer maybe, I had 2 more paintings left, and I think 3 more paintings left, and we talked about that we might be able to do another book together, and what we're going to do, and how the last 3 images I might twist them or turn them so they fit into the group as a whole. So it kind of influences a little bit the last 3 paintings for the series. And yeah, I know, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think what Kristy said is that as professors, we take seriously the notion of professing what we do, and that we're not just telling students to do things. In fact, I always make plain to students in classes that I would never ask them to read or write anything that I wouldn't read or write myself. We believe in what we're doing, partly because we practice it right alongside them. In the last 2 years, I've had an opportunity in a few cases to teach a poetry workshop. And often from day to day in the practice of a workshop, the students get exercises to do, and I'll give them an exercise. And while they are writing their exercise, I'll do it on the chalkboard. The same exercise that they're working on privately, I will do publicly on the chalkboard. And I say, I do this because I want you to know I'm not just making this stuff up. I believe in it. I think it's important, and I'll do it right along with you. And I warn them too that, what I put on the board may not be very good. It may even seem a little bit embarrassing at first. But the thing is that you have to get something out. The exercise isn't to produce something perfect on a first attempt. It's to get into the process. I always tell them the reader is not your enemy. The subject is not your enemy. Your enemy is the blank page. That's the beast you have to slay, whether you want to make a painting or write a poem or whatever it may be. So the main thing, a lot of the exercises I give the students for writing practice in class have to do with getting rid of that doggone blank page. Get something. Whether some people like free writing, some people like outlines, some people like sketching, but some go back to the 60s, and some people like tossing buckets of paintings at walls. There's all kinds of things you can do to get yourself started. And the purpose of the exercise is to get started. And then once you do, then you let the thing take the shape it wants to take. And it's a really, really fun process, I think. And that's another thing we try to share in the teaching, and that we hope will come across in our own product when we make something that we are occasionally critical of ourselves or our culture, or sometimes we just have fun with it. But we really enjoy the process. To us, it has meaning, and the process has value. You never know if it will get to an audience. You never know if, even if it does, the audience will like it. But you can't think of it that way. You just have to engage in it and hope that it comes to some sort of useful and enjoyable result.
Yeah, and I was thinking it's really very much the same process in art making. And oftentimes I'll give the students exercises in writing and just various ways, analogies to music or dance that help them see what they're doing in a slightly different way. There's so much, cross fertilization between ways of thinking that can be helpful for students. And Ed and I have done some teaching. Most Ed's come to UWGB and worked with my students in the upper level drawing classes to give critiques or go through exercises. And I found that incredibly productive. It's very articulate, and we find images and certain processes that we think really pin things down and focus things for the students at that point in learning about drawing and their own ideas that have been really helpful. And we enjoy doing that.
Yeah, it's enjoyable somewhat. It's a little bit nerve-wracking.
He makes it look easy, so
it isn't. I always tell the students when I look at the paintings that I'm not doing a critique. I'm not qualified to do that as a raw art critic or as an art professor would do. What I give is an explication, an explication. I look at the painting and I see, here's what I see. Here's what that tells me as a reader. Tell me about what you were thinking about. Am I getting what you hoped I would get as the viewer of your painting? So it's more a respondent and encourager than a critic. Yeah. I think of it anyway.
Yeah, that's really true. But Ed's looked at so many, written so many texts, looked at so many, or read so many, texts as part of his job. Then looked at all my artwork for all these years. Yeah, we've been married almost
30 years.
30 years. So he certainly has a sense of my process. So he brings all of that to a workshop, which is just wonderful.
And you have to work at a bunch over time. You know, there's a lot about, Kristy mentioned our trip for the Piero della Francesca trail, which was wonderful. But I think for the first time in my life, I really viscerally got postmodern art on that trip, because you know, seeing Piero, you're sort of moving into the Renaissance out of the Middle Ages, and when you look at paintings from that age, there's among subjects one that you see repeatedly, and that's Madonna and Child. I mean, everywhere you go, everybody's painting Madonna and Child, and not just once. They're painting it a lot. And you get the sense that it must have probably been a school exercise or a learning exercise, that everybody did a Madonna and Child, and then another Madonna and Child, and then another Madonna and Child. So we've been looking at all these Madonna and Child paintings. Not that there's anything wrong with them. Madonna and Child's a wonderful thing to paint, but I was getting kind of tired of them. And we had a little bit of extra time one day when we were in Milan, and we went to the Modern Art Museum, which had a special show on postmodern art from contemporary Italian artists. And I had never got it before. But after looking at all these Madonna and Childs, we started looking around that exhibit, and I finally, not intellectually, but viscerally, got it. These people are making sure they don't paint a Madonna and Child. You know, it's not going to be that. Whatever else is going to be, it's definitely not going to be that. You know, I'm going to stick a tree limb out of the wall here, and I'm going to put an old bicycle wheel here, and I'm going to spray a bunch of paint all over it and drip it here and splash it there and throw some leaves in and mix them in. And you know, it's just it's making sure you don't do that. And it's making sure that whatever the expression comes from, it comes not from a traditional image, but just deeply out of whatever is moving you, the artist, at that time. And you know, that's something that you know, 30 years ago, if I had tried to understand, I wouldn't have had the means in my own experience to understand it yet. But that experience really gave me that means. And sometimes as hard as you try to learn something, or as hard as you try to teach something, it just can't happen yet. And you have to be willing to give it time and let it come about in its own way. And it will, but it takes persistence. Sure did for me.
Yeah. I was thinking of Piero della Francesca too, and in some ways his paintings seem so postmodern, because they have these really odd little like conversions of elements. They're sort of on the cusp of sort of medieval things, but Renaissance things, and then geometry things, in an almost pure sense, these sort of like pumpkin round heads. And then, you know, how that's sort of really more sophisticated ideas, because he wrote about geometry and perspective, and he was a mathematician by training. So then there are, you know, things that you just think, what's that doing in there? That's a, you know, this little hat from the Renaissance, or that isn't from that scene. You know, there's just so many odd and beautiful things that Piero della Francesca puts in, and he wasn't really acknowledged as much for quite a while as being an important Renaissance artist. But I think he is, yeah. So looking to past art can sometimes, if you think it's from the past, it's actually sort of, you know, really subversive and revolutionary or whatever. I'm not sure if the revolutionary is the idea, but yeah.
Yeah, I also found that as much as we both enjoyed looking at Piero, what really struck me even more was the next generation of painters, Luca Signorelli, who I think was a student of Piero once upon a time. And Piero is as compositionally revolutionary as they are. They're a little bit like everything made into still life. I mean, the paintings are very, very still, very quiet. But then you look at the next generation, you look at Luca Signorelli, and it's all movement. You know, everything is counterpoint. and turn and twist and movement and activity. And the paintings just really kind of explode into life, even though they are still two-dimensional objects. They have polydimensionality, including a temporal dimension. So it's fun to watch all that stuff as you see it happen historically, and you see each generation get what it got from the previous, but then take its own turn, as you really hope it will.
I think we're maybe running out of time.
Sorry, talking too much.
No, I wasn't cutting you off. I didn't want us to go on too much longer. But we hope that people that maybe don't know as much about art can read our book and enjoy it, and maybe learn something new. We hope that people that know a fair amount about art will get a good chuckle. We hope that students will read it and go, oh, that's a really interesting way of saying that. I hadn't quite thought of it in that, specifically that way. That kind of clears that up for me. And maybe it can be a book that helps them trust themselves as creators, as idea makers.
Yeah, and let them have fun in the process. Yeah. Do you have any questions for us? We talk too much, sorry.
No, it's okay. So what is the best place to get your book?
Well, right now, you can get it from the publisher, which is Elm Grove Publishing. You can find them online or through Amazon. I don't know, does Barnes & Noble have it?
Google Books has it too.
Oh, okay.
Google Books, and I think almost every major carrier of books you can get it through. There's some nice reviews on Amazon we were really pleased to see.
We had hoped to do some readings locally and to have the book maybe at local bookstores, but the coronavirus put a hole in that big idea. So yeah, we talked to Heidi Rock, who has the bookstore in Algoma, and we talked to, she was kind enough to say we could do a reading there when opportunity permits, but we don't know when that will happen yet. We don't want to bring people out into an unhealthy environment, so but we hope some local establishments will carry the book once opportunity permits. And
part of what I've been working on too is a collection of tapestries, since I'm sort of having this interest in textiles. So all of the images from Through the Veil that are featured in the Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy are also in industrial jacquard weavings. And let me see if I can grab one from, this isn't a finished one, but there's a,
so the interested person could buy one of these.
Yeah. And they're weighted and have a rod pocket, and they're actually really beautiful jacquard weavings.
All ready for hanging. It's nice, heavy material.
This isn't sewn up yet, but it's a sampling.
You guys mentioned that this project was your first collaboration together. I'm curious if either of you collaborated with other artists or writers in the past.
Quite a lot, actually.
I'll let Ed take over.
Yeah, you gotta.
I'll be right back.
Kristy has done lots and lots of multi-person shows. Over the last few years, there's been a number of shows that have been circulating at different colleges and universities. So she does that as a regular part of her work. Not long ago, my sister and I published a book of ghost stories, of short stories. My sister's a high school English teacher, and she just took up writing seriously about 3 years ago, but she's already published half a dozen books. And we were talking on the phone one day, and she said, would you like to collaborate on a project? And I said, sure. I said, what would you like to do? And she said, well, how about if we do a book of stories? I mean, this sounds sort of like a Rabbit and Kitty Boy story, doesn't it? And what kind would you like to do? And she said, well, I've always liked ghost stories. And I said, yeah. She said, I said, I like ghost stories too, but I don't like mean, nasty ghosts who are trying to drag people down to the underworld. So how about if we do ghost stories, but they're helpful ghosts instead of nasty ghosts? And she said, I like that idea. So we did. And it's been a little more than a year ago. We published, it's called A Walk in the Dark. And that I think you can also get online. That one, I had to use my own name for it rather than the pen name, though, because we dedicated it to our mother. And I didn't want to be confusing by putting a pen name on a book for Mom.
Ed has another new book that just came out. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. We had hoped actually to have that to be able to show, but Amazon is way behind on printing. I guess also because of economic issues now, so I don't have my copy to hold up. But if you were interested in it and wanted to look it up, the title of it is Between Such Distant Shores. That uses the pen name Edward S. Lewis. It's just out about 2 weeks ago from Mirador Publishing, which is in England, and that I know is up on Amazon as well as some other places, I think. I've done some scholarly collaborations too. Nick Haydock and I, he's a well-known scholar, we did a book on Beowulf on film. So yeah, the collaborative process, it's interesting. It's different than just doing something by yourself. It really is a whole lot different. And sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder. Because you got to really work with someone else's vision as well as your own.
And then a follow-up to that, you guys talked a lot about your teaching practices and personal practices and how those feed one another. And I'm curious if you have encouraged students to work in collaboration in your classes.
Yeah, some things, just exercises I think that are really helpful are round robins in painting. You know, oftentimes, and that's usually something that's more abstract or intuitive, I find is a little bit quicker and more conducive. I think a lot of times, you know, we can get really possessive about our painting and that, you know, you feel, I guess maybe it's your ego just gets really wrapped up in it and you want to do a good job. And sometimes that feeling of control takes over and maybe you need to step back and release control and collaborate with someone. So often find doing round robins where, especially if we're doing an abstraction, that we'll move around the room and paint on each other's paintings. And you never know what the other person will paint on your painting. And you have to respond then. You go back then to your painting and you see what people, maybe like a round of 5 different people painted on your painting. And then you go, oh, wow, that's a lot different. But it's really jolting, oftentimes, sometimes in a bad way, but then you have to paint out of that. And sometimes in a really good way. You may have marks that, or shapes or structures that you think, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. So it kind of bumps you out of your own head, but then you're the person that has to integrate it together. So I find that to be a really good exercise, is round robins. But
yeah, I actually do something very much like that in the poetry workshop. I call it an exquisite corpse project. It's after the Salvador Dali and his generation of painters who, you know, did something like what Kristy was describing there. And the way we do it for poetry is everybody gets a sheet of paper, and then each person writes one line of poetry at the top. Then you pass it around to the next person, and the second person writes the second line, and the third person writes the third line. So each person has to take into account what did the others say and what's the pattern that the poem is establishing. And it's really fun then to see what the poem comes out like at the end. And sometimes, you know, I thought it would be kind of a mishmash, but sometimes they actually come out to be really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we taught a collaborative workshop at a place called Quartz, in a place called Quartz Mountain. It was for the Oklahoma Fall Arts Institute, which we were working primarily with high school teachers that taught literature and art. And we had some collaborative things using wax and the idea of revealing and concealing the property of wax can do that. And then how that could carry over to text. And we integrated exercises and the physical media, paint materials and drawing materials, and then also writing materials, and then used examples in art and literature for them to see and refer to.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.